One Russian Marine Brigade was probably destroyed in Kursk, and the second suffered heavy losses. As a result, the occupiers from the 810th Marine Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces were withdrawn from the battlefield for restoration. After 4 months of continuous fighting, the Russian Ministry of Defense has decided to withdraw units of the 810th Brigade from the battlefield for rest and recovery, Forbes reports. The brigade had up to 2,500 occupiers who were transferred to Kursk region together with Marines from the 155th Brigade. The brigade is currently resting in Plekhovo, which was recaptured from the Ukrainian Armed Forces at the beginning of December. One of the Z bloggers wrote that this is just a temporary rotation, but the occupiers will have time to take a little rest. Russian war correspondents made it clear that this was not a flight or a retreat, but simply that the 810th Brigade was a strike group in Kursk and Putin's soldiers needed a rest. As for the 155th Brigade, over the 3 years of war it was completely destroyed more than once, so it had to be rebuilt from scratch. The 810th Brigade also suffered heavy losses. The brigade allocated 2 battalions for the battles in Pogrebki, but almost all of them went to Kobzon during the battles with the Ukrainian Armed Forces. One should not forget the recent shelling by the Ukrainian Armed Forces of the command post of the 810th Brigade in Lgov. At the same time, Russian war correspondents write that this event has nothing to do with the fact that the Russian Ministry of Defense decided to recall the 810th Brigade from the front line. Even Z-War correspondents admitted that Plekhovo is not the most ideal place for rest and rotation, since the settlement is located in the area of artillery strikes of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The battles for Kursk region are costing the Kremlin dearly. Even with a large advantage in manpower, Putin's army managed to regain control of up to 25% of the previously lost territory in 4 months of fighting. So far, no analyst can say the exact number of losses in the ranks of the Russian and North Korean armed forces during the battles in Kursk. According to the Ukrainian president, Kim's army has already lost 25% of its army. Considering that Kim's army adopted the Russian Federation's tactics, meat assaults, then most likely the Russian armed forces lost at least 25% of their army on the battlefield.
Cases of desertion among Russian soldiers have become more frequent in the temporarily occupied territories of the Kherson region. To combat this, Russian command has begun blocking detachments, reports the National Resistance Center. It is noted that the reasons for desertion and cases of self-mutilation are the unwillingness of the Russian soldiers to die due to the ambitions of Russian President Vladimir Putin. To find deserters, additional forces of the Russian National Guard have arrived in the region, performing the role of blocking detachments. It should be noted that the enemy is resettling the occupiers along the Dniprov riverbank in empty Ukrainian houses and seized dormitories. For this purpose, the local occupation administration compiles lists of suitable premises for settlement, the report states. According to information, mass desertions in the brigade have been recorded due to the commander's abuse of power, group beatings, threats of being sent on one-way missions, and round-the-clock duty shifts that deprive soldiers of rest. Additionally, military personnel have gone for months without receiving payments. Soldiers unwilling to tolerate such treatment are abandoning their positions. Some, through their relatives, have sought help from human rights organizations. According to the US Institute for the Study of War, ISW, mass desertions in the Russian army are linked to poor treatment by the command and the inability to provide soldiers with sufficient weapons. Recently, ISW referenced an article by the Russian opposition outlet Zaznia Istory, which disclosed details from an internal Russian Defense Ministry document. According to the document, over 1,000 Russian servicemen, including officers, deserted from the 20th Motorized Rifle Division As of April 20th, 2024, the number of deserters exceeded the personnel of a whole battalion. It is noted that the command of the 20th Motorized Rifle Division had appealed to the Defense Ministry for assistance in locating deserters. It also surveyed personnel from the 33rd and 255th Motorized Rifle Regiments of the 20th Brigade. They attributed the high desertion rate to heavy losses, failure to deliver promised payments, and the practice of deploying wounded and ill soldiers in assaults. These complaints mirror frequent Russian ultranationalist blogger complaints about the Russian MOD's poor treatment of Russian military personnel, and the alleged internal document indicates that the MOD is likely aware of the scale of Russian morale problems, the ISW expert stated. Ukrainian forces have lost about half of the territory they captured in Russia's Kursk region. US officials estimate that if Russia steps up efforts to push back Ukrainian forces from the start of the new year, the Ukrainian military could be forced to withdraw from Kursk by spring 2025 to avoid the risk of encirclement. That could deprive Kiev of important leverage in ceasefire talks with Russia. This is reported by Bloomberg. The Ukrainian army is already facing personnel shortages and uncertainty about future supplies from the United States and other allies, while trying to resist a Russian offensive in the east. In the Kursk region, where Ukrainian troops have captured part of the territory, they are opposed by about 12,000 North Korean soldiers who support Russian forces. If Moscow launches a more coordinated effort to push Ukrainian forces out of the region, it could happen as early as next month. In that case, US officials estimate Ukrainian forces could hold the area only until spring before being forced to retreat or risking encirclement. This period is crucial, as Ukrainian officials plan to use the territory captured in the Kursk region as leverage in future negotiations. Despite statements by President-elect Donald Trump, who took office on January 20th, that he wants to end the war as soon as possible, reaching a ceasefire agreement could take several months due to the complexity of the situation for both sides. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday, December 26th, that he was unaware of the Trump administration's proposal to freeze the war in exchange for guarantees that Ukraine would not join NATO for decades to come. He also stressed that such an agreement would not satisfy Russia. With Russia's advantage on the battlefield, it could drag out negotiations to try to seize more territory before a potential ceasefire can solidify the front line. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces have managed to hold on to positions in the Kursk region longer than expected, thanks to US permission to use long-range missiles to strike Russian territory, one official said. Another official noted that Ukraine's goal in Kursk Oblast was not to hold territory, but to create a shock effect from a counteroffensive and wear down Russian forces. In that case, the retreat could be presented as a tactical success. Two other officials expressed hope that Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenski would decide to withdraw from Kursk Oblast in time to avoid heavy losses. Despite the possibility of a Ukraine withdrawal, the operation has already inflicted significant losses on both Russian and North Korean units. John Kirby, a spokesman for the US National Security Council, told reporters on Friday that North Korean forces, backed by Russia, are carrying out intensive attacks on Ukrainian positions in the Kursk region. As a result, more than 1,000 people have been killed and wounded in the past week alone.